What's up, everyone? We got Mando with us today. So today's episode is going to be called This is the Way. And we're actually going to be talking about extreme thinking. So that sounds a little extreme.
Yes.
Oh,
but
man.
It is the only way.
Yeah, the only way. Thank you guys for joining us today. We are so excited to have another live stream with you all. One of the reasons why we do these live streams is to get people to interact, ask questions on certain topics, or even if it's off topic, comment below. Let us know what you guys think of the conversation. If you guys have any questions, and always love having Doug on. I say this in every live stream. It's awesome to have a licensed therapist on to ask. It's a great resource to have someone on to ask questions to. So. Again, thank you guys for joining us. This is the Resilient Purpose Podcast live stream. That's a mouthful. And we're on YouTube and Instagram. And so if you aren't following us on those, we have some great content out right now to go back through and watch some of the podcasts. So
Every Monday.
Yep. Every Monday we release them. So Doug, how was your weekend?
It was good. All my days start to blend together, so I'm trying to remember what we did. I think it was nice. Was it nice?
Yeah, Sunday was good weather.
Yeah.
I think Saturday was too.
Family dinner night. Those are always enjoyable.
Yeah. So you're intermediate family?
Mm-hmm. We our crazy household plus my in-laws plus brother-in-law, things like that. Oftentimes we have our niece and her boyfriend over, and those are always fun times.
Yeah.
Kids love it.
So is that in your guys' home? Do you guys try to do that as much as you can on the weekends to have family over?
Usually it's a Sunday night tradition, but it's not always every Sunday, because sometimes we need a break. We need to recover.
Yeah.
So
you need to recoup.
We need to, and so that's. But no, it is very fun. The only drawback would be if we could just have Monday off.
Oh yeah,
because bedtime after the whole family's over, it gets the kids all wound up.
So that was Sunday you had family time.
Yeah, we always do Sunday family dinner.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what time do your kids go to bed? Do you try to get them
5 p.m.
5 p.m. Wow.
No, 8:30, but it usually turns into 9.
Yeah.
So
how just kind of curious with you raising your kids, how big is structure in your house to get them kind of regulated? And I mean, with you, with regulation and everything.
Abby.
Yes, Monday's off. I'm gonna share that right now. Yes, Monday's off.
And then Tuesdays turn into Mondays, so it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Structure. Well, I mean, school year helps, because you got school for most of the day. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, though, when 24 hours a day, that's a lot of structure.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, if your kids are sleeping for hopefully 8 to 10 of those.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, we typically try to do homework at predictable times, dinner at predictable times. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, a lot of times it's neighbor comes over and our kids are playing and doing that. It is much more crazy when kids are like involved in sports and things like that. So
yeah.
But yeah.
Have you always been structured with them, or was that something that you've learned more and kind of evolved in?
Yeah, I mean, structured around certain times. I mean, it's not all the time, because ultimately I feel that over structuring can be a detriment. Like, I mean, people have to learn how to deal with one of the worst things I hate to hear from my kid is I'm bored. Like, go find something to do. Like, go do something.
Yeah.
Like, I can't be your entertainment 24/7. Like, you got to figure out a way to entertain yourself and find something to do. And everything isn't always so exciting and something to do. There are going to be downtime, and kids have to, and we all have to learn how to deal with downtime. And if you think about, like, if you ask a teacher, like, when is the most challenging time with your kids, it's transitions and downtime. So if there's ever, and so we overpack a structure, and that, talk about extremes. We go from one extreme to the next. So, and then that becomes, now we can't be flexible in any way because we've overpacked it.
Yeah.
So we can't change things up, and those type of things. So
comment below, how are you guys with structure? That is something that I, as an adult, am trying to get better at and trying to get into some type of structure that's good for me.
It is. I mean, in the theme of today, it is balance. Like, you don't overstructure. You're not winning a special award by structuring every second of the day. You're just making your life maniacal, because like, that's crazy. So,
well, and everyone's not going to fit into your structured day.
Right. Yeah. Right. And then what are you going to do when you had something on your schedule and the weather doesn't work out for it? Or, are you flexible enough to change? And so April's saying thrive with structure. I think that's structure and routine is good, but what happens when the structure breaks down? What happens when the kids are not responding to that structure in the way that you want them to? And that's usually where all the problems start to happen, because the structure you set up isn't necessarily best for the kid that you're structuring or the person that you're structuring. So you might structure based on what you think people should be able to handle, but it's not developmentally relevant to what the kids can handle. And so you end up having a lot of behavioral problems because they're not responding to the structure. So you have to be very thoughtful about the structure. Are the things that I'm putting in the structure helpful for the kids, benefiting the kids? Is it something the kids that are they craving? Are they thriving with? Are they responding to? What are the activities? Are you putting activities that are meeting their developmental needs? Like, you can structure school all day long, but if the structure involves sitting in a chair for 6.5 hours a day, that's horrible structure because kids need to move. So
I one of my favorite comedians is George Carlin, and he was talking about parents and structure and stuff. And he's like, when's the last time a kid just went outside and picked up a stick?
Right.
It's like, do they even know what a stick is today?
Right. Can I just sit on the couch and just relax, or does there always have to be an activity going on?
Yeah, exactly.
And I just go back to, you also don't want on the other extreme where you just sit around and do nothing. I mean, that's not helpful either.
Yeah.
Extremes. Stay away from extremes.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is something that I think that I struggle with, and something that I'm very intrigued by too. And so what we're going to be talking about a little bit today is black and white thinking and polarizing thoughts. And so to kind of set this up, Doug, you and I had a conversation one time where I was kind of asking you, how can you check your pulse to when you're being maybe unhealthy or something's not very well balanced? And you started teaching me or started talking to me about extreme thinking, talking in things like always and never, and only a Sith speaks in absolutes. Star Wars reference. Right. But and that was so helpful for me. And also too, because I would be, you can ask my girlfriend, at one point in time, I'd be so much about what is right, what is wrong. And sometimes it's not about right and wrong. It's about what is helpful for someone, what is helpful for me. And I would spend so much time trying to find an answer to something that it would really hinder my days, behaviorally and other things. And so kind of a very big topic, but start where you want for the audience. But how would you explain black and white thinking and polarizing thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's the cognitive inflexibility. So it's either all or nothing. The black and white are the polars, it's all or nothing, never, always. There's no flexibility, there's no gray. And a lot of times this plays a role in the more stressed we are, the more black and white we become in our thinking to kind of protect ourselves. So if I feel threatened by somebody, or if I'm hurt by somebody, then you're always that way. And so that is a protective measure. If I always know that Kaylee is always hurtful, then I will stay away from her. Or they always do that to me. It's these cognitive distortions to protect yourself. It's like defense mechanisms to protect yourself from being hurt. So by thinking in these extremes, it's rooted in fear of the other side of that extreme. So the idea is, if I don't go full force into one direction and full, that idea is, then the other side of things is what I'm afraid of. So the more gray I get, the closer I get to what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
Right. So,
okay.
And I mean, you see it. I mean, the obvious examples are gun rights, abortion. These are very polar opposite belief systems. There's no gray, there's no flexibility, there's no understanding on other people's points of view. It's either no gun rights at all, just everybody gets their guns, or there's all gun rights, or no one has guns, or whatever. It's these kind of and not necessarily recognizing that maybe there are points to both sides. Like maybe there's some, understanding, and there's, if you look into Adam Grant. He is an organizational psychologist. He's a professor at Penn University, I think, or University of Penn. But he talks about some research related to, how that if you actually allow to hear people's points of view and then share points of view, you're gonna solutions better come from that gray, that that recognizing points of views. But he talks a lot about that polarization and things like that. So black and white, I think is.
Would you also say too, like, I would say if someone's listening is like, how can this benefit me? Why is this important and relevant? Like you were mentioning some political things, that there are politicians that prey on that kind of thinking, that are their whole kind of brand is built on black and white thinking.
So you always have that first day of the week. Yeah, no, that's I agree. So I'll give you an example. We've been having gun violence shootings for the last, I don't know how many years. And we've never had a viable or productive solution to those tragic acts. And so the polarized thinking prevents us from finding a viable solution and intervention. And so it keeps us from moving forward, because if I think in black and white, then I am not interested in white thinking. I'm interested in only the black side of things. And I don't mean in racial points of view, but so we only see the issues with the police and what's that?
Police brutality.
Well, the police brutality, but defund the police.
Okay,
that's a very polarizing statement that keeps people afraid to even broach that topic and have a reasonable, thoughtful discussion about what's going to best, number one, help the police in being able to do their job effectively and not have all that violent, like those killings that are resulting from whatever. How are we going to get those solutions? But we can't get to those solutions if we're all stuck in our own side of the pole.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a term for it as well, but in that black and white thinking. So if you bring up defund the police, then I say, my uncle is a police officer and he puts his life on the line all the time, and how dare you say that? And it's almost like you're just going to the opposite extreme trying to argue, when you say that, I talked to my brother about this one time, and him just saying, like, there's just a lot of money that's going to militarizing the police, that we can use that for training. We can use that like kind of that.
Redirect to mental health services,
Yeah.
which is a huge majority of their calls that they respond to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about things that the real message or the real problem that is being identified gets lost in these polarizing statements, these names and things like that. It doesn't make people feel safe to have that conversation. So the other thing is feeling safe to have those conversations. That can I have a reasonable conversation about gun rights and not feel threatened that what I hold in value is going to be taken away?
Yeah.
You know, like is a solution, which I don't necessarily blame those fears, because, you know, politicians making decisions about, I mean, I've lived many years where people that don't do the work are making decisions about me doing the work. So people that are not, you know, at my facility providing my services, doing all those things, are making decisions about the way I should provide those services. You know, and they're making decisions based on whatever, but they're not necessarily taking into account you know, what works best for organizations or things like that. So that leads to a lot of struggles in terms of how to carry out the best work, because we're often not allowing, we don't have a good system with how big our country is and how big states are to make decisions that can positively affect everyone, right? And so people clutch to that extreme way of thinking to prevent being in a situation where we're going to lose our jobs or lose our way of being able to live. So,
yeah, like another question that I have too, Doug, is that what could polarizing thoughts say about your current mental state?
that you're stressed.
Okay.
So the more stressed we are, the more in high states of arousal, the more polarized we will think. When we are, so we talk about in the work that we do, state dependent functioning. It's a Bruce Perry concept. And it's the idea is that we function based on what kind of state we're in. And so the most regulated state is a state of calm. And in those states, we're able to think abstractly. We're able to be creative. We're able to problem solve and do all those things. Then once we get stressed and we get more alert, we are more externally focused. We're really a little bit vigilant about what's going on in our environment. So our ability to think creatively and think abstractly and all those things is much more challenging. And then the further along that continuum to alarm, fear, and terror, we lose access to our cortex, our ability to think, you know, and so then we become more reflexive, more reactive. That's why those defund the police, you know, all these little short, kind of powerful, divisive statements are very effective, because
Elicit a reaction.
We can elicit a reaction. We can access those mantras that people use to, and you know, when we get in a high state of stress. So ultimately, I don't know what the best environment is to have these conversations, but you know, in a political arena, those are I would never want to be a politician, because it would be so hard to work through things. Yeah, it would be so hard to come,
especially on a TV show where you have 5 minutes to talk about you could spend hours talking about. Tracy says, stress is a cause of so many negative states, and there's a lot of things creating that. Yes.
And so we are trying to navigate these things in these high states of arousal. So we make lots of bad decisions. We're impulsive. We cope maladaptively, because we're never calm. We're never relaxed. We're never regulated. And you make fun of me for saying stay regulated, my friends, but ultimately that's true, because ultimately the more dysregulated we are, the less likely we'll be successful. And that's the thing. It impairs everything when we're dysregulated. Our ability to do the things that we want to do in the way we want to do them, our ability to relate well to others, all those things. Yeah. You know, and so then we end up hurting people, and
One of my best friends, Josh, commented, said anecdotal evidence is what he had kind of put down there, which is true, is saying, you know, my certain experience is the extreme that only people could experience things this certain way. No one else can experience it differently. And then saying that as evidence and using that as a point to argue with someone.
Right.
I think, Josh, if you have anything else to say, feel free to comment below.
So if it happened to me, then it's happened to everybody. Would be my guess. Like if what Josh is saying is because it happened to me, because someone might have tried to take my guns because I got into a mental health issue, then or whatever, or something happened. So then it filters my thinking to generalize to everybody to that extreme.
Yeah.
Would be my guess is what he is alluding to, that anecdotal evidence that makes it true.
Yeah. And so next question is, as far as professionally, Doug, how have you seen black and white thinking hinder clients from having breakthroughs or block their development?
Just optimism and pessimism, hopelessness and hopefulness. So black and white thinking leads us to often where I see it in clients is it'll never get better. That person will never change. I'm my private logic turns into very extremes. I'm stupid. I'm no good. I'm broken. I'm worthless. These very extreme self-beliefs that just basically make it really hard to make progress, to do positive things, to even appreciate the positive in our life. So.
Yeah, well, I want to throw in real quick. I had a conversation with someone, and they had mentioned to me that God had told them that, don't rely on this caretaker, that this caretaker will never change, talking about their mom. Their mom will never change. And I'm like, God told you that your mom will never change? Like, that's pretty pessimistic for God to say. It's just, I think
God's been really paying attention to that family dynamic.
Yeah, but it's how this has changed me in thinking and given me freedom is just, and also protecting myself when people are saying stories or trying to convince me of something is how extreme is their language. Have you seen, do you relate with that at all? Do you ever, when you listen to people and they're talking very extreme, like I never do that, or I always make sure that and when they talk in this extreme language to you, maybe as helping a client out and professionally, or maybe in your personal life, ever hear that and you go, okay, there's more to this. There's something they're not seeing, or this is very extreme. Does it kind of put your antenna up?
And this is actually leading up to the lady that we're meeting with on Thursday to film a podcast, Signa Whitson. She is the chief operating officer of Life Space Crisis Intervention Institute. And it's a crisis intervention, and one of the self-defeating patterns of behavior is called reality rub. And I know it's a maybe a complex name, but it really illustrates the impact of my lack of ability to see the gray leads to a lot of maladaptive behavior because I'm responding to that. I'm reacting to that black and white thinking. So the idea is that the more entrenched in this reality that they have based on that polarized black and white thinking, you can't directly tell them that what they're thinking is wrong. You don't want to deflate their identity or their viewpoint by, that. And I think that's where things target. So when you get black and white thinking, the idea is the instinct is for people to just totally tell them that they're wrong, and that there's no precedence in what they're saying. Typically, it's really about just asking questions and maybe kind of steering them and helping them paint the whole picture or look at things differently. Have you ever thought about this, or have you ever thought about that, or you said this, but
how did you come to that conclusion?
How did you come to that conclusion? What evidence do you have of that? Help talk me through it, walk me through it, because this is really upsetting you and really making it hard for you. So you got to be somewhat gentle with it, because the more you push to prove somebody's reality is wrong, the more entrenched they will become in their reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Josh commented back and said, my personal experience reflects the state of reality. Is kind of what he was saying.
Yeah. Our experiences and the filters in our brain are shaped by those experiences. So we see the world based on how we've experienced life. So,
yeah.
And a lot of that is laid down in early childhood. So how we were raised and, you know.
Yeah. Well, we just filmed a podcast this morning with Mike, and you were mentioning that in your residential work or your mentor, there was one where during this family intervention that the therapist had told the kid, don't you talk to your mom like that. You don't talk to her like that. And instead of telling that kid, instead of being a mirror, being more of a facilitator, she was taking on the role of maybe a parent or something like that, which probably would have been more helpful for her to ask questions and to kind of lead. How did you say that? The film or play out the film or?
Well, gosh, I don't even remember. Can we roll back the footage? I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think what I was getting at was that you're bringing to light the pattern of communication and then how they're affecting each other and is what they're trying to do happening, is what they're trying to do, like what they're trying to accomplish, is the intent matching the way we treat, people. And so, what are people's goal in their behavior, and are they accomplishing their goal, or are they making it worse? So sometimes we can get over assertive with somebody, and it doesn't get them to hear our points of view and understand it. It actually pushes them to resist us more. And it's because we became over assertive, we became more aggressive with the way we're communicating. So sometimes it's not that our intention was bad, it's just that we couldn't control our arousal level and we became too aggressive with it.
Yeah.
And so highlighting the pattern, like what are you asking the kid, what are you wanting your mom to understand about this situation?
Yeah.
Do you think she understood it when you cussed and yelled at her? What was her reaction? What did you notice about her reaction? And what do you think that means? And getting people to think about how they're affecting their
and you've mentioned it before, especially if we're really stressed, how much of our lives are in autopilot.
Yeah.
Where there's just reflecting our internal state. And something that Tracy had put down is and I'd like for you to talk about it. She said a great use of reflective listening is a big key. So reflective listening, is that saying back what you heard? That's what that is.
Not parrot, but reflecting basically how you understood what they said. So, I can, or even just reflecting their experience, that must have been really hard for you, or I can see you must have been really mad, or gosh, I can see that, you're really, tore up about that, or you're just reflecting what you think their experience is. Now, in those situations, that kid could say, no, I don't feel that way. You're wrong. And be like, okay, help me understand, But
how did I misinterpret that?
I find reflective listening to be even more helpful in gaining information about that person's experience than asking a question. When people feel understood, they're more willing to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Because almost like when you start conversations with people, they want to make sure that you understand them, or that they're going to get the response that they want. So they don't usually come in with the deep issue right away. They start off with some surface level things, see how you respond to it, and then go further.
Yeah, like putting your feet in the pool.
Right. Dip your toe in the water and
seeing.
Yeah,
absolutely. There is even. I even know this stuff, and it's still hard for me in certain situations because, like this past weekend, my girlfriend was really stressed about something, and I really wanted to say something like advice or like ask her questions, but really. In that moment, I thought in that moment, I was like, you know what? She needs me to hear that I understand her pain. Like that must be really hard. I can't imagine. Because one of the things that she said is that, do you understand how hard that is for me? It's something that she's going through. And so for me, I was like, you know what? I don't need to give her advice. I don't need to ask questions right now. I need to really understand where she's coming from and try to really feel what she's going through. And that was really helpful. But even too, there's just times where that's so hard because it's like, it's like forgetting something. It's like me getting upset. I put this on my Instagram story. It's like I get upset for you about forgetting something, but it's like you don't consciously choose to forget something. You forgot it.
Right.
So the fact, yeah, I just think that that's funny.
They,
that we
they
do
almost,
that.
yeah, they almost, they're really trying to say you purposely chose not to
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And then you get the great advice where, well, Doug, you just need to remember better next time. And it's like,
Right.
thanks, that was really helpful.
Right.
And so moving on, these are some things that I got off the internet as far as, so polarized thinking is considered a cognitive distortion because it keeps us from seeing the world as it is, often complex, nuanced, and full of shades in between. So can you talk a little bit about cognitive distortions?
Yeah, just a distortion in the way we think. So we see things that are not necessarily representative of the reality that they're in. And so, black and white polarization is a cognitive distortion where you see things in black and white, similar to what we're talking about. It's a very cognitive behavioral concept that because of the way we think, it affects the way we feel and ultimately function. And so because we see things in a certain way that might be distorted, like I might think that, you're meaning something by your comments, so it upsets me, whereas somebody else might see it, that wasn't your intention, or that's not even how it came across. It leads to more challenging it creates roadblocks into, so oftentimes like a cognitive behavioral therapist will try to challenge those cognitive distortions. So if one of them is black and white thinking, we're gonna share some gray and just lightly dose you with some gray and see how you handle that gray.
So let me see if this is kind of putting you on the spot. So if I'm someone that's like, because I've been through this before, it's like nothing's going to change. It's always going to be like this. I'm always going to be like this. I've tried this before. It never seems to work. I don't even know why I try. I'm just not even going to be around people like that, or I'm just done. I'm done with this person. They're never going to change, and I'm just tired of trying.
Right. Well, so can you give me any examples of why you think it's always going to be this way?
Because I've tried multiple times and it just keeps happening the same. I keep getting the same thing, shut down by people, being misunderstood, and it seems like I'm the problem.
Okay. And so because of that, you feel like that you've tried what you can try and nothing ever works. And so my question is, that I'm wondering, is what ways have you tried to communicate your experience to that person?
And seen.
You didn't want to go that deep, right?
No, I should have picked something that I'm actually going through, but I couldn't think of that. I was trying to go deeper, and I'm like, I don't know how to go. I don't have any examples, but that was good because that was getting me to think, kind of reductionism kind of thing.
Well, yeah. No, so my first thought was, okay, are you trying the same way every time? Like, are you communicating the same way? Or I might say, give me an example of a specific time, and let's walk through it. And just even kind of looking at those situations.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and maybe seeing how you could do it differently. Maybe that it's not so pessimistic because there's other ways to try it.
yeah, and a lot of times I see it with like, okay, can you think about a time, and maybe it's not in the midst of your cognitive distortions, but can you think about a time where you tried something and it worked even just a tiny bit? Like, and can you tell me about that time? And then that person would be like, well, I remember when I was walking with Mr. So-and-so around the courtyard, I really felt good. Okay, well, let's talk about why that felt good. The movement and the walking. So sometimes we don't realize what works because it only worked for a little bit, and we stopped. We just didn't keep continuing it. And so, is there ever been a time where, and maybe it's about a different subject that you're trying to talk to your wife about or whoever about, where she did listen to you? Is there? Can you think about a time where maybe, it can be about anything where she did listen to you, and then you might think about, okay, that time. Okay, tell me about what can you tell me about that situation where, and so try to pick up on, okay, maybe it's in the way that you communicate or the setting in which you communicate. So there's all these things that contribute to why something's not working.
And do you, as a therapist, do you kind of see whenever you get them to think about those things, you kind of see the dominoes fall where it's like, if they think about this positive thing, then it's going to make them think about this, or could bring something else up that's significant about that they may be suppressing.
Right. You could see light
repressing.
bulbs, or and what I would say is that the challenge is, so I've had many experiences where the light bulb has gone off or turned on, and clients have felt really good about realizing, gaining insight, things like that. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee that everything changes. Yeah. You have to translate, okay, now that I know that insight, how am I going to use that insight to make things better?
Okay.
So if I recognize that when I force my significant other into a conversation about how I feel, it never goes well.
Yeah.
Then am I going to now start trying different ways? Like, hey, can we talk later today about this or whatever, and ask first, or, whatever, and try to, do it that way.
Yeah. Be helpful in that way. Because you also mentioned something this morning that, the self-fulfilling prophecy, to where if the dad is always made out to be, or the mom is always made out to be this, like, they don't want to be, like, people don't want them involved, they make things difficult, but then when they feel that way, they're like, see, I knew it. Right. I knew it. Well, why do I even try? And it's almost like by the way that we're communicating, we're almost fueling that self-prophecy where they're like almost validating them. So like if I'm going into a conversation, like you mentioned, like a husband's going into a conversation with a wife and forcing the wife to talk about something that she's not ready to talk about, it's almost like you're going to push her even more into her
to get the response that I believe is going to happen anyways.
Yeah. Or for the negative thing she's already feeling, you pushing her on that is going to further entrench her in those beliefs about the situation or about her husband.
Yeah. Yeah. So self-fulfilling prophecy is really that based on my beliefs, how I believe. And this might go back to, is it Josh? And kind of what's talking is I have a certain belief about something. And so that belief is typically going to feed what triggers me. So if I believe that no child should ever disrespect an adult, then that's going to be a trigger.
Oh. Okay.
And it's going, anytime I see a kid trigger, that adult, or that triggers the child disrespect, that's going to kind of, so those beliefs lead to what triggers me, and then I start kind of overreacting to those situations, and then it brings about that response. So I might, my self-fulfilling prophecy is, Johnny is so disrespectful to adults, and he's whatever, and then I engage with him in a way with this idea that he's going to be disrespectful to me. So I'm more curt with him, or I'm more
more aware.
I'm more expecting it. So I'm almost challenging him, like and this is at an unconscious level. So what ends up happening is I almost end up instigating the child in creating this reaction from the child, and going, see what I tell you? Look how disrespectful he is. He doesn't care about adults. But I'm not thinking about how I fueled that, which is based on, and kids often, that's a self-defeating pattern that we see. Our beliefs trigger, create those triggers. If I believe I'm stupid, then, challenging schoolwork's going to be triggered to me, and, and things like that.
Yeah. Well, this is random thought that has popped in my head is that where we kind of get into manipulation, when people are aware, like the example you just gave with the teacher and the student, and the teacher's like, see how disrespectful he is, see what he does, but almost in a point where you're conscious of that, where you can get him to react a certain way. I don't even know how conscious people can get of manipulation, or if they're even conscious of it, but is that a form of manipulation that someone could use?
So manipulation implies intent.
Okay.
So certainly if that person is intentionally trying to tick the kid off to get him in trouble, then yes, it's manipulation.
What if it's to prove a point, to prove that he is
Then
difficult?
If that's my intent, then I am manipulating the situation.
Okay.
So yes, but typically if the intent is I'm wanting to stop the behavior, or I'm wanting things to get better, but I end up getting into these power struggles with client, then, or with the kid, then that manipulation. Oftentimes, we think people are being manipulative when we've felt manipulated.
Okay.
So when we feel manipulated by a kid or a partner or whatever, then we assume that they intended to manipulate us. But oftentimes it's just more of how they're reacting and adapting to the situation. It's more of their more reflexive and reactive responses, or how they've learned. The most common example is the way we view attention-seeking behavior, that kids are purposely acting in these certain ways for attention, and we think it's manipulative. And so the unfortunate thing is, when we think it's a manipulative, then we start to ignore the kid or disconnect don't give them attention. And so then that actually makes the problems worse, and it fuels it, because we misdiagnose the problem.
Yeah.
Because we're not getting the kids' concerns. We're just running their behavior through our own filters. So, because I always ask, like, okay, why would a kid engage in this self-harm to get attention, when there's a million ways to get attention? What is something is going on in this kid's experience that is fueling this behavior. There's so many ways to get attention. Why choose these extremes? Yeah,
well, I bring up, when I was doing a live stream, someone from my school that I graduated from was saying that adults say that the only reason why she developed an eating disorder was to get attention. I'm like, out of all the things
that you could do,
that you could do, to say that she's just doing that because she wants attention, I mean, just absurd to me to think that. I mean, that you would want to feel the discomfort, you'd want to be depressed, you'd want to self-harm, and how you look at yourself, and living with your mind every day.
And if it was simply that I wanted attention, then I would say, what is going on with this kid, where that the only way that this kid can get attention is through these really challenging behaviors? What skills is this kid lagging? What is getting in the way of this kid being able to,
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of moving on, Doug, under the same cognitive distortion. So some of the things I looked up too, there's like a list of them, but here's some of them: all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, and jumping to conclusions. So there was 2 jumping to conclusions. I can't remember one of them, but one of them was mind reading.
Mind reading, yeah.
So do you know of any more, or elaborate on those?
Well, like mind reading would be, I know he's going to say no, or so I'm not going to even ask, what's the point? Okay. Or, what's the point of doing that? He's just going to, do this or do that. So we just jump to conclusions that there's no point in me asking for whatever, in the way, doing this particular skill, with this person, because he's just going to say no or whatever. So we make these, we jump these conclusions that there's no evidence to bear that out.
Yeah, interesting. And guys too, if you're watching, comment below. Let us know if you ever had moments that you can acknowledge in the past where you've had extreme thinking, or that you've had black and white thinking or polarizing thoughts, and how you overcame that. Or if you're struggling with that, comment below and let us know your experiences. And so another one is overgeneralization. So that would be everyone's so if I have an experience, a manipulation thing, I think I'm sensitive to that because I've went through that in the past couple of years, I believe. And so whenever I feel that way, or whenever I see something similar, I want to say, see, they're all manipulating.
Yeah, it's not much different than all or nothing. It's you're overgeneralizing that. If I went to this school and had a bad experience, and all schools are like that. Or if I went to this church and it was a bad experience, then all churches, all pastors are like this person, and we generalize. That's based on our experience, and it's all these things are protective in nature. It's the way we think about our experience to protect us from getting hurt again. So by saying that all schools are like that, so it leads me to not go to school, I am protecting myself because I don't want to get hurt again. If all men are bad, then I don't go into relationships with men because I'm afraid of getting hurt or whatever, because of a time where I was abused by a man, or say vice versa. So these are things that our thinking becomes protective in nature, and especially if we're stressed. So especially if we're in high states of arousal, our thinking is more focused on what our brain perceives as the threat. So, when I'm in a calm state, I can be more flexible in my thinking. I can recognize the concept that not all men are like my abuser or whatever. But when I am in a social situation with another man, it triggers these trauma reactions, which then doesn't allow me to drop my guard and be more relaxed and engaged in that.
So in many situations, let's say the one where you're in a social situation and a woman is feeling very stressed being around, like certain behaviors are happening with men or in this group. So taking that certain situation and then maybe making it more broader, but what are some ways that we can acknowledge that we're having some trauma responses and what we can do about it?
Well, I think the first thing is to normalize trauma reaction. So helping people understand the impact of how the brain is impacted by trauma. So educating people about trauma and what it is. So that accomplishes the idea that you're not alone, that what you're experiencing is not abnormal, that it's actually a normal response to a trauma. So what you're going through is not, not bad in nature. It is protective in nature. Then the other thing I would say is you would want to, outside of revisiting those trauma experiences and working through those traumas, would be to focus on safety. So how can I create safe environments to address these generalizations, right? And to challenge these generalizations. So you would want to, you wouldn't want to send somebody to a big social gathering to test that. It might be just,
or maybe if you have a really close friend, like, hey, I need you to be by my side, like, help assure me.
What can I do to create a safe, reaction? But if you educate people about their trauma reactions, then they can recognize them, and more body awareness. So, that's why we really focus on, especially with trauma work, is more body oriented approaches, because it's the body that's really storing the trauma. Like there's a famous book on trauma called The Body Keeps Score. And the body is giving out these alarms to your brain and saying, no, stay away, and alarms, and the brain, all those things are being triggered by these trauma reactions. And so at a very cognitive level, like if I'm providing you with therapy in the session, and all these things at a cognitive level make a whole lot of sense. But when you go out into the world, your body has a different memory. Your body hasn't been able to process that. So even though from a cognitive point of view that not all men are bad, your body doesn't draw that same conclusion. And then the signals that all the chemical stress reactions lead you to engage in fight or flight. And freeze type reactions in those situations. So that's when we see the maladaptive coping that occurs.
Something I just looked up that was interesting, I didn't know this either, was there are 4 responses that are often brought up when talking about sexual trauma or abuse. So there's fight, flight, freeze, and appease, is what Google's saying. So I'm curious, what would appease? Have you ever, what's appease? I know appease is like wanting to please someone, or as far as make them think a certain way about you, but can you maybe elaborate on the appease aspect of that?
Well, I think it's trying to reduce the impact of trauma by appeasing to your abuser. So you
maybe bargaining,
because if I just give in to what they want and don't challenge or anything like that, then that person won't hurt me. So now where that happens is not necessarily with your abuser, but you start appeasing anybody. So you no matter how bad it is for you or whatever, you just start kind of appeasing.
Would you say that could also be like people pleasing? Like maybe if someone struggles with like assertiveness, like even just saying no to someone as far as doing something for them or like a favor, and they take so much on that they always say yes because they're trying to appease.
Yeah, that certainly would be an example of you're not thinking about what's best for you in that situation. You're only focused on how can I get this person not to hurt me? And that's more of a, not necessarily in a really conscious way, but so.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Yeah. Cause that was just, the appease part was interesting to me, as far as, even if it's a social thing where you don't want to be talked about in a certain way, or your certain experiences where they might say something, so you got to act a certain way. I mean, when we were talking to Hussein, he was talking about being a chameleon as far as adapting to different things. And I know this is a weird segue, but can you bring up the book that you've read to your daughters before about the chameleon and how, and that kind of concept of, so with Hussein, he was talking about how he struggled with depression, he struggled with these different things, and that he would just act a certain way and appease other groups of people. And I thought that book was really interesting about
the color of
concept.
The Color of My Own. My wife, if she would probably have to correct me, I think it's Color of My Own, where this chameleon feels a lack of identity because he keeps changing color. So he doesn't have a color of his own, because anywhere he goes, he resembles that color. And he feels really upset about that, and wants to have a color of his own. So he keeps trying to create situations where he can have that color of his own. So he's like, I'm going to be the color of green on this tree leaf. And that works until fall happens and all the leaves fall, or they turn orange and whatever. Or then he changes different colors in the winter and in all the different seasons. And so that is... he keeps trying and trying and trying, and none of it works until he finds another chameleon who basically says, we can't have a color of our own, but we can be together as we change color. So the relationship wins over, being able to connect with another chameleon and experience the changes together, and that type of thing.
I just love that concept. Even you telling it again, that's such a great thing to teach children, as far as how to adapt, and that, just because, I mean, like when we started at the start of this live stream, it was structure, but it was like, if your structure is based around being green like this leaf all the time, what happens when fall comes?
Right.
It's not going to work, and you're going to feel bad, and it's going to create a
structure
lot of...
without flexibility is rigidity, and rigidity is bad for survival. So you are going to have a lot of problems when the structure can't respond to what's happening in the environment and in the experience. And so where this happens is when the structure starts to have problems, we hold stronger to that structure, thinking that that's what we have to do, and then it collapses.
Yeah, well, that makes me think too, especially growing up in church and church recently, is it's almost like, if you can if your belief changes when you go through something, then your belief wasn't really strong to begin with. Almost like if your belief or your thought process withstands the changes, then it's more valid. But if you change, or your flexibility, or you think differently, it's almost like, well, you weren't strong enough in that belief to begin with.
Right. And that is where it's kind of goes back to conventional wisdom, and conventional wisdom has always been proven to be wrong. So, the world's not flat, but people thought and held on to that belief.
Wait a minute. I'm a flat earther.
Right. But
Time out.
people have held on to that belief for a number of years. Autism was caused by refrigerator mothers. We know from the research and the sciences that is not true.
Refrigerator mothers.
The cold, kind of not emotionally responsive mothers and stuff.
Okay.
They got blamed for that. And so these are things that get shown to be untrue, but we keep holding on to these conventional wisdoms. And so that's basically, we have to be open to change, because it goes back to kind of the things that we like this is why we have amendments, because the world changes. Like we get new technologies, we get, the population grows. So like these things that we have in place were meant for this amount of people, but now we have this amount of people.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't make sense
Yeah, the
anymore.
founding fathers didn't know Twitter and
Right.
Facebook were going to be.
So we have to adjust and adapt. And so
Yeah.
there can be some core beliefs, that make sense, but they have to be really, if you get presented with a lot of evidence that shows that doesn't hold up, then, you have to be open to change. I know that's hard and it's challenging, but it's, I don't know. I think people have to just be, core beliefs in terms of, like I see of like, okay, values, those are things that are not necessarily going to be changeable, like valuing family or valuing respect of others and things like that. But even that has to be flexible to, if you're getting attacked by somebody and, someone's trying to mug you and you defend yourself, that, but that's not being very respectful to that person. But you have to be flexible and know, well, like my survival depended on it. So I'm going to have to put that value aside for now, to kind of deal with that. So there has to be flexibility in those things. The more rigid we get, the harder it is for us to adapt to what's happening in our experience.
That's odd. I think that's why education is so important, because even like when we've talked about children, telling them don't disrespect adults, like this very, not that that's a bad thing, but then if you never teach them how to think for themselves, then what happens when they get into a situation where an adult is abusing them, where an adult isn't being fair to them? If they've only been taught you never disrespect an adult, I don't know what it is, or the very extreme comments too, but like especially getting kids and people to think for themselves.
What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Yeah.
Like, what if your belief is wrong? How is that? And you keep holding on to that belief when it's wrong. Like, what's that doing to your life and to your relationships and to your, those things? Or what happens? Like, how many times do perspectives change related to issues when they experience it themselves? Like people understanding addiction better when someone close to them has gone through it, or people changing their perspective on, say, gun rights because they lost somebody to gun violence or whatever. I mean, those are things that are going to play a factor in those things.
I even saw something recently, bringing up politics. I saw something recently on Twitter where it was like, was it Dante, the most recent person that was killed? Yeah, and it was a woman officer that had accidentally shot him. She reached for her taser, but it was her gun.
Right.
And I remember on Twitter they were like, people were outraged because the police officer is being charged with manslaughter, and they're all just like, it was an accident, and there are all these things, and they're almost like propping up just being unbalanced with the fact that someone lost their life. Like someone lost a phone call from CVS.
Okay.
Someone lost their life, and we're arguing about, like, I don't know. It's like, I don't want to go so far that way.
So this happens in most, especially with like, so when violent shootings happen, if you get on social media, the immediate thing you see is gun right activists going, don't take my guns, and all different forms of that. And because they're preparing for the fight of gun rights, like people posting that, it's like, instead of just having compassion and solace, just understanding for the people that are suffering right now, and trying to just be open, or even having dialogues about it. And
even being able to talk about it. Yeah.
Right.
But if they had grown up in different parts of the country where that's somewhat normal, would they would their first reaction be, you're coming for my gun rights? Because their experience, what shaped them, they're familiar with that.
Well, I mean, if you listen to it's the Australian comedian Jim Jeffries, and he has a whole thing about gun rights. It's pretty funny. and he's like, they had this really mass shooting, and so the government said, we're gonna take your guns. And so everybody's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And so they just accepted it, you know, and you know, that just that was the kind of the mindset behind it. And I'm not, you know, advocating either way, but that's a difference in countries, but a lot of different countries are so different and so many different dynamics to it.
Yeah.
That's why it's so hard to have these conversations, you know, like there's so many impacts to it. It's not as simple as this or that.
Yeah.
It's what kind of rights or what kind of policies do we need to put in place to improve the safety of our society while respecting the rights of our citizens.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, how do we take the concerns that, you know, there's a lot of value that people find in the guns that they carry and use and you know, the hunting and whatever, you know, fashion they use it in outside of, you know, killing others and stuff like that. But they're also, you know, is it really that hard to understand the other side of, we would love for school shootings not to happen or, you know, violent shootings to happen and murder to not happen anymore? Like, how do we reduce that? And it's not as simple as doing one thing. It's not as simple as taking everybody's guns, because if it's not guns, it'll be someone attacking with knives. And if it's not knives, it'll be, you know, there's a whole host of things, but doesn't mean that you can't have some policies around making the world a safer place.
Yeah. And I can't imagine the state that if you lost your son to an accident, or like just the trauma, just the people that were close to him that are going through that pain. Like, I don't know, just to dismiss that and just say, you know, well, you're wrong. I sympathize with you, but you're wrong.
This is where cognitive flexibility is. Can I have multiple discussions? Can I have a logical, useful, productive conversation about gun rights and be understanding of the violent situation and what those folks are going through?
Yeah. Yeah.
Could I you know, tolerate having a conversation like that so that we can maybe improve things in our society?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, Doug, we're going to wind down here, but I have a couple more questions for you. I am very interested personally in this to kind of get your experience with black and white thinking yourself, and how did it play out for you? Can you think of a time when you were very rigid, or maybe it was with your wife or with a friend, but do you have any experiences where you kind of walked out of it and said, you know, I didn't see the whole picture?
You know, probably other people would probably be better at asking this question too, that can point that out. I actually really do consciously try to think in gray. I'm a very gray person. So I don't know if I have really
Very gray person.
See, I don't know if I have a really good example, but what I would say is that I often, where my black and white thinking might come out is in why, like, the intent I put on other people for their behavior. So like I might assume or make assumptions about why someone's doing something, why they're acting that way, whether it's my own kids or whether it's my employees or whether it's a client or whatever. But yeah, so that would be, I guess black and white, the Yankees are always a terrible team. You know, Red Sox rule. But no, I mean, I don't, yeah, I mean, I think obviously when I'm more stressed, I probably get a little bit more black and white in terms of we're going to do it this way.
Yeah.
Being accepting of other people's ideas and stuff like that. I tell you what, it is it's work.
Yeah.
You know, to keep myself.
We'll get you out of
in a state.
autopilot.
Yeah. To be open and understanding of people's points of view. I mean, I'm literally training collaborative problem solving, which is all about not being black and white thinking. So I spend a huge amount of time trying not to be that way.
Well, for you personally, let's say that there was something with us that we thought differently or we believed differently on a subject, and you're very stressed. Like, what's helpful for you? So if someone's trying to get past a black and white thinking with you, or if you can remember a time, how have you found yourself in what's your best position to be in to be flexible? I mean, obviously relaxed or like regulated, but are there any ways that you have taught other people?
I have to have some sense of control in the situation.
Okay.
So, I was like, I gave you that example of that supervisor that was mad at me because of a thing that happened the evening before, and she's like, we're going to talk about it at noon. I went into that meeting. I was not caring about their point of view at all.
Oh.
Like, I was not open to them. I just wanted to tell them kind of how ridiculous they are. And so those are situations where I was not in a good state, but I felt out of control.
Yeah.
I didn't feel I had any sense of control in that situation. So it was hard for me to be understanding of their point of view.
Now, when you said out of control, it was because she was already came to her conclusion.
Yes.
And you were there solely to just say, I'm going to dismantle that.
And she also set the stage of when it was going to happen. And it was, it was 2-on-1 in the discussion. And I didn't feel like that person was interested in my point of view.
Okay.
So
it's like, well, if you're not in mine, then well.
Right. If it didn't feel like, oh, let's try to resolve this issue and figure out what happened. It was, you did wrong because whatever.
Yeah. Well, we have a comment. Kim says, agree to disagree, ?
Agree to disagree. You can, if you're, if you feel like you need oftentimes I would say that doesn't really solve the problem. And it's gonna, if you guys are gonna continue to interact in these situations, it's just gonna keep coming up. So, what I would say is we probably have to do a better job of. It's not necessarily what the agree to disagree situations tend to be where people are just worried about getting the other person to understand their side of things and not trying to understand the other person's point of view. That if we really drilled down each person's concerned about the problem, or maybe it's correctly identifying the problem. For example, agree to disagree about whether Republicans the right way or Democrats the right way is not a very useful conversation. But having probably similar concerns on issues that, or being able to understand people's concerns about why they feel a certain way about a policy or about an issue or whatever, I think are much more fruitful conversations and much more productive. But
can that be used to can that be pacifying language too? So if you and I are arguing, it's like, you know what, Doug, agree to disagree. And it's almost like you're just wanting the conversation to stop, or
you're feeling like it's not going anywhere, and so we're just going to agree to disagree. What I would say is that is more of like, so in collaborative problem solving, that would be like things are not going well, so I'm going to plan C it because it's just going to create more challenging problems or more.
And I'm over this. I want this to stop.
Right.
What's a better phrase to say than agree to disagree? So if we're arguing about something and it just getting to a place where, Doug, I'm getting really frustrated right now. I think we need to stop maybe another time.
I feel like that we're having a really hard time understanding each other's points of view. I think we need a break, and maybe we could find a time to revisit this conversation. But right now, I'm not in a good place right now to continue this conversation. Yeah. So I would love to kind of figure out another time to come back to this, but right now I feel like we're not getting anywhere with this conversation.
Yeah.
And
I kind of think too, when we say agree to disagree, could there be a level of like, this problem cannot be solved? Like almost a level of consciousness where it's like, you know what, this is just a thing where I'm not going to change your mind. You're not going to change mine. Let's just drop it. Almost like a kind of a pessimistic kind of look maybe on that.
Right. And I would love to. I mean, I think in those situations to kind of drill down specific examples, maybe where they agree to disagree, and could you drill down each other's points of view and concerns and get to the concerns a little bit? Yeah. To kind of say, okay, how do we come up with a solution? And I think I should never really try to get you to believe differently than me or same as me, or I shouldn't try to change the way you necessarily believe, but I want you to be open to other ideas and to be willing to come up with solutions that meet both of our concerns. So you want to believe in the Republican way or the Democratic way, by all means believe in the Democratic way. But when we come up with policies, can we have policies that navigate both belief systems? Can we come up with resolution that addresses both of our concerns? I'm sure there are things we can do to do that. And so that's where I would focus on. Not, I need you to be a Democrat because that's the only way we're going to solve this problem. No, we need to come up with, we can have certain like I see our political parties really identifying priorities. Like Republicans have a certain priority, what they find to be important to them, and Democrats have certain priorities that feel important to them. So can we come up with policies that address both priorities? That would be, kind of where I would go with that.
Yeah. And Kim says, I see that point. Thank you. So yeah, that was, I thought that was a really good discussion, talking about that. And yeah, there's just a lot of more things that I could say on the subject as far as political, giving simplistic answers or solutions when they're not.
When it's more complex than that.
They're more complex than that. I think that's part of the problem where we get in that vicious cycle too. But well, thank you guys for watching and listening today. We do want to talk a little bit about, we're filming a new episode this week on bullying. And so we would love to get some comments. If you guys want to message the Facebook page, go to our YouTube channel and message us, or go to Instagram or email us. Let us know what are some topics that you would like for us to discuss on this subject of bullying. If you have been affected by bullying, if you have, for me, I know in high school I was a bully, making fun of people. So if you're on that side or you have been on that side in the past, and you have some topics there that you would like Doug and
Signa Whitson
to talk about, please message us. We would love for you to hear what you guys have to say on that too, and questions. And so, do you have anything to say on that, Doug?
No, just Signa is somebody that I've known for a number of years. She has wrote several books related to the topic of bullying, but she also does she's created curriculums that we've actually used in our work at my last job, related to how to be friends. And it's a book called Friendships and Other Weapons, just about, kind of counteracting bullying and being able to create cultures of caring and things like that. And she just does great stuff. And she's a counselor, I think social worker, but she also runs the day-to-day operations of life-based crisis intervention, which is a training that we have done in the past in my last job. And she just is very knowledgeable, has a lot of experience, and is a great person. And I think we're going to have a great conversation. And she just has a really wonderful perspective about bullying and captures she has a lot of resources related to all the different dynamics at play, on both sides of the fence, the bully and the bullied, and how to recognize real bullying,
and we've seen that so much in movies. Like, I think a lot of people are, at least at the surface level, know what bullying can look like.
Yeah. But there's a really good definition about it, and I'll leave it a cliffhanger for the audience. But the idea, it's going to really kind of help people, because one of the things in my experience, at least years ago with working with kids, everything was bullying. Like it was so overused that it was just used for everything. It was just an easy label to give somebody. You're being a bully, you're bullying, blah, blah, blah. And it was just, it prevented people from really truly understanding what was going on and really understanding the problem.
Interesting,
So she's great. I look forward to talking with her and then sharing it with the world.
Absolutely. And one other thing too is that, and I am excited about this, is we have created a Resilient Purpose Podcast Facebook group. And what we're wanting to do is kind of move away from the lives that we have on Life and Purpose Behavioral Health's page and kind of move into these groups and still be on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. And so I'm actually going to, if you're watching on Facebook, I'm going to comment the link below. You guys can join that. We're going to have discussions in there, kind of a more closed off group where it's not so public. So people that are joining want to join under a common purpose of learning about mental health and things that, and getting feedback too. I mean, we really encourage feedback and questions and even disagreements where we want to learn more about what you guys think, what the culture thinks about different things. And so that is in the description. And you can also go to our Instagram page to find that as well, that link to take you to the Facebook group. And so we'd love for you guys to join. Do you have anything to say on the group page?
Well, no, I think you handled that very well. I would just say that we wanted to just keep building this platform to reach as many people in many different ways. So people that are really interested and engaged in these issues. I mean, the really cool thing is we've seen some really loyal people come back to each of these live streams, and I would imagine I've been watching the podcast, and so this would just allow for opportunities to have more conversations, not for the whole world to see, but to just
more of in a safe place,
trying to create as safe of a place, as possible. I mean, it's not going to be group therapy, but it's going to be resource sharing, discussion groups. We're working on different types of products and resources for the public. So, there might be a group that gets to get a first look at some of the material and be able to comment on that. So you can be a resource to us. You can also help support kind of ideas for what you guys want to see in the live streams or the podcast stuff. So it just allows for more of a feedback loop for us. So
yeah, I'm really excited for that because I know that mental health can have a lot of different facets in it, and we want to definitely create a safe space where people can feel free to comment. And we have guidelines on our Facebook group too, that when you guys join, you'll be able to read as well on what to follow and stuff, because we want to create a safe space. And so, well, thanks again, guys. This was a really good discussion. I think I'd like to have another kind of discussion on the phrases like agree to disagree.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
That was helpful.
Kim's been great by kind of really asking good questions, and Tracy and stuff like that. So I think those are really, I don't know if fun's the right word, but I really enjoy having that engagement, and I find it. Yeah. And if people are getting something out of it, then that's even better. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many that we could probably go through. Is agree to disagree. You're just like your mother. That one stings.
Well, there's some truth to that, but no, I just.
Just so many other phrases. You're just hurt.
So there's this. I can't remember who was talking about it, but the research kind of shows that in your first 7-8 years of life, you resemble your parents, and then when you're in 8 into your teens, you're resembling your peer group. And then when you go into early adulthood, you start to turn back into your parents. So you just have this cyclical, and it has a lot of elements to proximity. So there's a lot of research around proximity and how we are influenced by the people that we're closest to, like in proximity, not in relationship. So there's actually research that says that we are often more influenced by the people we spend the most time with than who we would identify as being closest.
Well, there's a whole podcast right there, live stream right there. I'm very interested in. Yeah. So and my favorite insurance commercials right now are the dad ones, where it's like when the guy comes in and he's like giving advice to people. He's like, who else likes to read books on submarines? My dad. and then it's
live, laugh, no. He throws
that in. And my favorite's the throw pillows.
Yeah.
He's like, see, there's nowhere to sit here. And he starts throwing them off. She's like, well, wait. And then I love those commercials.
You don't even know how true that is. That pillow one. Oh my Lord.
I know. Yeah. The people that too many throw pillows. And then people
stop sitting on the pillows. Well, why are they on the couch?
Yeah. Why are they here? They're not even comfy. Like those on that couch right there. They're not even comfy at all. Yeah. I love
just taking up the space. I can't even fit on there.
And
there's so many pillows.
Let me correct myself. I think my favorite one is when the guy's helping the guy fix his plumbing. And he's like, what, are you using an Allen wrench there? He's like, remember, you paid him to do this. You're not assisting him. He's helping you.
Right.
That's so great. The props to Progressive for making those commercials. Those are very funny.
The one in where the guy with the blue hair is walking in.
Yeah, he's like, we all see it. We all see it. Oh, man. And it's like, he's teaching people how to silence their phones. Like, my phone doesn't silence it. Yes, it's right here. Just kind of flick that button right there and silence your phone. Oh, really? Just great stuff. So again,
Does anybody know how to open a PDF?
Yep. Oh man. Well, thank you guys again. This was I really like this one. A lot of things hit home, and so again, if you guys want to interact, what you would like for us to talk about on future live streams, please let us know. And we have a new exciting podcast coming out next week where there's a event tied to it. So that's all I'll say on that.
What? Cliffhanger?
Yeah, cliffhanger. I'm giving him another cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger, hanging from a cliff.
Oh man. All right, guys. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.